There's a group of souls with me that feel that their life experiences have caused a feeling of victimisation, in that they feel a limited that they weren't able to accept or experience more, and that determined where they now are, and it's not a place of light.
Yep. Well, the truth is, after we pass, we can still continue. So if that's the time of passing here, we can still continue towards love even after we've passed. And many people, when they pass, don't realise that. Can you imagine for a moment if you were living, say, you were sort of a religious person in a Christian faith, and you're taught that if you're a good person, you go to hell. Oh, other way around. If you're a good person, you go to heaven, and if you're a bad person, you go to hell. And what defines what is good? Well, it's what generally your church defines as good. And then what's defined as what is bad is what your church generally defines as bad. Or if we're more based on Bible beliefs, what the Bible defines as good and what the Bible defines as bad. So let's say you were on earth and you, with all of your heart, were practicing what the Bible said was good. That was your life, which is where these spirits are, right? So that feeling, what the Bible says was the right thing, and I wanted to practice that, I want to practice that. They tried their best to practice that given the circumstances they were in. And then all of a sudden, you pass. And where you passed to, you didn't know at the time, but was actually a reflection of your soul condition and not what you did. Although what you did was a part of your soul condition, but it's everything of what you did, your desires and beliefs and everything. So let's say one of the strongly held desires in this Christian faith, or one of the strongly held beliefs in this Christian faith, was that everyone who's not of your faith is condemned. Now that's a lot of judgment, right? And your soul has a certain emotion about this judgment. And actually the judgment is not actually a loving emotion. And actually I alluded to that in the first century when I talked about judgment being a damaging emotion. But many people, they read the Bible and they go, yeah, judgment, damage, emotion. I skip over that, I don't judge, you know. It's only that you're condemned to death, but that's all right. I'll just continue read. You know, there's no personal reflection of what's being said even in the scriptures half the time. Do you know what I mean? With regard to what's being said. So what happens is they pass over, and imagine for a moment all of your life on earth was dedicated to a life of Christianity, let's say. You pass over, and because of the emotions you held on to, you passed into the hells. What emotions would you feel? Well, the very first emotion generally is rage. Rage at, well, firstly, generally it's aimed at God and me. God and Jesus, it's generally aimed at first, right? Thinking that somehow God and Jesus taught them inaccuracies. But that's not true. If they read what I said in the scripture, what I did actually say, and they listen to what I did actually say, I never taught them an inaccuracy about it. In fact, I actually alluded to that when I talked about an illustration called the rich man and Lazarus, where the rich man who thought he was good on earth passed over and he passed into the hills, and the man that he was mistreating on earth, he passed into the heavens. And I've alluded to this all the way through in the teachings in the first century. And so if they read the Bible differently, they would see that these teachings that we're now getting taught have been taught for 2,000 years. But what they have a tendency of doing is not reading all of that with personal reflection. Because nobody wants to admit that their own soul condition needs work generally. In other words, they don't want to look in the mirror and look at how they really look. And the problem when you pass is that when you look in the mirror, you're going to find out how your soul really looks. And a lot of times it ain't that pretty. It's often very scary. In fact, a group of spirits came to us last week and described how different it was to what they were expecting. So imagine, and we talked about this last week, imagine if I don't know my soul condition right now and I pass over, what happens is my soul condition within a very short period of weeks will be exposed to me. I'll come to see what my true condition really is. And my true condition will be as God measured it, or as God's laws measured it, and not how I believe it to be. So many of those spirits, Jen, they're having it measured by what they believe it to be when they passed, and then when they passed, now they had it measured by what God knows it is.
How can my own sense of good be so used against me?
Well, the only way that, is that the question they're asking? Well, the only way that can happen is by our own sense of good being flawed. And this is the problem, is that for many of us, and I've said this over and over again in these presentations, one of the best things you can do for yourself is to see yourself accurately. To see your true condition accurately. No matter how scary it looks, no matter how bad it looks, one of the best things you can do for yourself is to see it accurately, to see yourself as you truly are. Right? And when you see yourself as you truly are, no one can hoodwink you about your condition. No one can convince you that your condition is better than it is, nor can they convince you that condition is worse than it is, once you allow yourself to see yourself. And the beauty of doing that while you're on earth is that you will not be forced into doing it, or it won't be a scary experience, I should say, when you pass. So for many of these spirits with you, Jen, they have not seen themselves accurately on earth. You either. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, and this is a truth that for most of us we all have the same thing, where we want to see ourselves as better than we are, or sometimes some of us want to see ourselves as worse than we are. But we're not very good at seeing ourselves as we really are. And it's as we really are that makes up our soul condition as God sees it, and that condition in love will draw us to the place in the spirit world where we belong in the end. But what happens when we pass is this. The instant we pass, and remember I've spoken already that the time of our passing, the location of our passing, and the way in which we pass is all determined by a whole series of law of attraction events based around our own soul condition, and of course the soul condition of everyone else around us is also affecting that experience. For example, if all of you were in a perfect loving state, that does not guarantee that you're not going to die. It actually doesn't even guarantee you're not going to die tomorrow. And the reason why that is that usually a person's in a large group of people in a loving state often then attract other people attacking them who are in an unloving state. And can you see here on earth, the people who are in a loving state can easily influence the people on an unloving state in the sense, and then this is the only sense, in that a person in an unloving state can harm a person in a loving state by choosing to harm them, by choosing to hurt them physically, or by even killing them. So for that reason, just because we are in a one-minute condition with God, it doesn't mean that we might not die. But of course there would be no pain in the process in that state. Does that make sense? No emotional pain in particular in that state. So here we are in this soul condition. We have a soul condition, and the soul condition, remember, creates the time, the place, and the circumstances of our passing. And you can see how much these things can affect that. For instance, my belief systems, for example, can greatly affect the circumstances of my passing. I'll give you an example. This is a very simple example, but it just demonstrates the point. If I believe that I shouldn't get any medical assistance when I'm ill, now for some of us had that belief in the past, haven't we? I don't want anything unnatural entering my body. I don't want doctors touching my body. We could have lots of different beliefs, right, surrounding that one belief system that we don't want to have anything unnatural touch our body. And so something might happen, like we may have an accident, and because we don't want anything unnatural that we think touching our body, we actually make a series of choices that end up in our own death. So you can see how our soul condition automatically affects our passing. Of course, I'm bringing all of these situations, in fact, without considering God in the process, right? Which most people don't do, let's face it. Most people don't do it when they're nearly dying. They generally don't consider God in the passing, with the exception of one moment, and that is just before they die, they want absolution of all of their sins, generally, even if they're not religious, and that's often the case. So our time, the place and circumstance of our passing are totally determined by our soul condition. And not just our own soul condition, but also the condition of our environment. That influences the process too. So when I pass, generally, there may be all sorts of experiences that happen when I pass, because my soul condition determines not only the time, place and circumstances of my passing, but it will also determine my experience in the state of my spirit body, when I'm no longer having my physical body with me. It will determine that as well. But generally, we can discuss a few points generally of what happens. One of the first things that happens is we arrive in the spirit world, and we don't generally see ourselves very much. Well, let's face it, you can look at your body, can't you? But I don't know about you, but I can't see my own backside very easily, nor my own back for that matter, unless I've got a mirror, right? And most of us can't see our own face. We don't have eyes that pop out and turn around and look at it. Oh yeah, that's what our face looks like. We're looking outwards. So there's a lot of our body we can't see, isn't there? And it's the same when you're past. When you're past, you still have a body, a spirit body, and you're looking out of your eyes, of your spirit body's eyes, and you still have hands, and you still have feet, and you still have a body that looks very similar in a lot of ways, but when you start to examine it, you start seeing cracks and fissures and different problems in your body, just like you had when you were on earth. You have physical problems with your body, right? Your back might be sore and your shoulder might be bung, and you can't get it above you, and there's all these different things going on with your physical body. And same goes with your spirit body. Your spirit body is just a reflection of the soul's condition. So anyway, I arrive in the spirit world, and generally I arrive in the place through the mists, which is actually described in the book Through the Mists, if you want to read that, from Robert James Lees. Anyway, I arrive in that location, often in a stunned condition, if it was a sudden passing. So if I have a sudden passing, I arrive there and I go, oh, wow, this is different. I wonder if I'm in a dream. I don't really know. And there's all this stuff that I don't really know right at that moment. I feel a bit disoriented. Wouldn't you feel disoriented? You imagine you're driving along in your car and you see this other car coming for you, and you close your eyes, right, because it's just about to hit you. And then you open your eyes and you're not in the car anymore. Wouldn't that feel quite strange? That instant reaction of change would feel quite strange to anybody, particularly if you're in a car accident or something like that. You see the car coming towards you, bang, it happens, and you're straight away in the spirit world, you've been severed from your body. And what actually happens physically with your passing is your physical body, which is connected to your spirit body via what's called a cord. The spirits call it a silver cord. It's actually a long stream of energy that goes from your tailbone to the top of your thalamus in your brain. And right from there to there, the cord follows this whole place. It's elastic in nature. In other words, it stretches and moves, and it can stretch all the way through your experience in the sleep state in the spirit world. And that cord remains keeps your bodies connected with their interfaces of all of their physiological and emotional functions. So in other words, every emotion passes through that cord, and every physical experience and every hurt and all those things, pains, but all the pleasures also, all pass through that cord into your spirit body, and then through a cord that connects your spirit body to the soul, and therefore passes into your soul. And so these cords, connecting your bodies together, pass information to your soul, you could say. You know, we could liken it to a robot, this physical body, being controlled by the soul, and everything the robot feels in terms of the touch and taste and smells and all those things the robot feels gets passed through this cord to the next body's experience. And eventually to the soul, because the soul retains all of those experiences from the moment that you incarnated right the way through your entire life. So there you have this sum total of experiences that are entering the soul from the bodies, and what happens when you die, physically what happens is this silver cord breaks. That's all that happens. In other words, this body, the physical body now, can no longer assimilate information and pass that information through to the soul because it's no longer connected to the soul itself. Does that make sense to everyone? It's no longer connected to the soul, so therefore no information can pass. So from that moment on, the physical body begins a process of natural decay. So you try 5 days after in the sun. Bit smelly by then. Doesn't take long for your physical body to... You bury a physical body without any wrapping or anything like that, and within a few months, the physical body will mostly be gone. And mostly it's just certain bones that will be left after that time. And even those, after a certain period of time, will disappear as well, generally getting eaten by the different things and by the different environmental factors, slowly decaying. Because the energy that the physical body needs to stay alive doesn't just come from food, it comes from the soul's connection. So you can try feeding a physical body that is not connected to a soul if you want, but it's still going to decay. You know, you pump it full of food, but it's not going to work very well because it's the soul that controls how the body, the physical body, actually even processes all of its food. The soul controls everything. So what happens is that silver cord breaks, and at the moment of that breaking you are surrounded, or even before the moment of it breaking, you are surrounded by a group of spirits that help you through the process, generally, help you through the process of moving from where you are now on the earth into assimilating your life in the spirit world. But the problem is that their assistance can only be given when you allow the assistance to be given. Now, for many people who pass, they have no belief system whatsoever of any afterlife at all. So you imagine what it's like for them when they pass. They pass, they're still awake, still alive, and they realise they're still alive, they can still see everything. Everything's very different though. And then there's some people around them who are willing to talk to them, but I don't want to listen to them. Like, I don't know who I can trust here. And straight away I start setting up some dynamics, emotional dynamics, because of my emotional condition. I start not trusting people, and therefore how can these people now give me information? It's going to be very, very difficult. So for some people when they pass and they have the ability to receive information, but they reject that. And they go straight away back to what they were invested in their life on earth. What are most of us invested in, really? Most of us are invested in our family and our property, are we not? They're the two things generally we're invested in. Sometimes we're invested in our religious background or racial background and some other things, but generally we have a personal investment in our family and our property. And so what are you going to be attracted to when you pass? Your family on earth and your property on earth. So you'll just sit there watching your family destroy your property. I created that. What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, why don't you have all these you have all these emotions coming up, and these emotions need to come up because these are things that you invested in when you're alive on earth, and you shouldn't have invested in them because they're all pointless to invest in, and we should have been investing in other things, and because of that, there are going to be negative emotions we need to feel about all of these investments. Does that make sense? Would you like to have a mic up the back there? Thanks, Sue.
I'm just wondering, somebody who's kept on life support, is their soul still in their body? Are they still there? Or?
Yeah. If the person's on life support, what is happening is the body is being kept alive, artificially so, but the silver cord remains connected to the soul. And as a result of that, many people who have stayed on life support for many years have actually just stayed all connected to their body. They live most of their life like in a sleep state type experience, but still connected to their body on earth. And the majority of them want that to be the case, 'cause that's part of their law of attraction. The reason why they want that is they're too afraid to enter the spirit world. So
can they make a soul decision to leave?
Yes.
And despite being on life support?
Yes.
Okay.
And their body will die. Yep, and they'll separate. Same goes with many dementia patients. We were talking about this last week. Many people with dementia are actually living a lot of their life in this state where they're totally afraid of their own emotion, totally afraid of what's going to happen in the spirit world. They want to retain a connection with their body to keep the body alive, but they don't want to be conscious of their own emotional state, so they go out of body. And it's just like this constant state of sort of like an almost suspended animation state, but they're still having experiences in their sleep state experience, but they don't want to pass because they're too afraid of passing. Yeah. It's the fear of passing, actually, that causes most of our distress at the times just before passing, right? And many people have huge fears of passing. And if we're a person who is conscious of this, we could sit down with let's say our parent has dementia, and we go to visit them every week or whatever it is. They don't know us. It seems like they're somebody else, and a lot of times, by the way, they are. They're often spirit overcloaked in this state where they're trying to get out of their emotion. And when they go to sleep, we could just sit there and say, "Mum or Dad, you're just afraid of dying. You're afraid of dying. And you're afraid of living too. That's why you're in this place. Right? You're afraid of knowing all of your own emotions, so you don't want to know that. And that's what's closed down your brain. That's what's closed down your cognitive experience. But on top of that, you're afraid of passing as well. You don't want to pass either. And all you're doing is creating all of this out of your fear." We can sit down and talk to them about that. If we've had a person in our family in a coma for many, many years, we can do the same thing. Ask them to make the choice. Do you want to be back here again, or do you want to leave? Which one is it that you want? Because most of them are too afraid to make the decision. Right? And we need to help them through the process. They don't have to fear the spirit life, but they don't have to really fear life here either. And we need to help them through that experience. If we go, Rachel, and then across to...
When my nan died, she died in the night, and in the morning I touched her, and there was kind of like electricity, I felt in her body. What's that? What was that?
A lot of spirits stay around their body for some time, and a lot of them, and I feel your nan did the same thing, she stayed around her body. They do that because they're afraid to move away from their body, actually, and go somewhere else. And so they often try and attempt to get back into their body. If you read the Paget messages, there are a couple of times where you'll see spirits who have experienced that as well. Mrs. Paget herself, when she passed, tried to get back into her body and hung around her body for some time because she didn't know what to do. She didn't want to listen to anybody else, and she didn't know what to do at the moment of passing, and she thought she could get back into her body. And so for that reason, many of them actually watched their own burial or their own incineration. And they see their body buried or incinerated, and then they realise they must be dead. And then they start asking questions after that. For many people, that's the case. Does that make sense? The energy is coming from... the body itself has a lot of stored energy, like a battery, but that energy usually within 12 to 48 hours is gone as well. Yeah.
The other question was, how do you look at your own soul condition as God sees you when you've passed?
When you pass, it's really easy. All you need to do is look in the mirror.
All right, what about on earth?
Well, when you're on earth, it's really easy too. All you need to do is look in the mirror.
That explains why I'm so freaked out when I look in the mirror.
Now, when you look in the mirror, you can actually, if you allow yourself to detune from your physical form, you can allow yourself to see your own spirit body. And therefore you'll see your own condition. I know different ones of you are now starting to practice that, looking at people's spirit body and seeing people's spirit body. How many of you in Mary's courses now have had the experience of seeing somebody else's spirit body who was sitting in front of you? A few of you? Yes, there's a few of people who have had that experience. And the truth is you can see your own spirit body. The truth is also that for the majority of people they don't want to. Because we're very addicted to what we look at now, and we don't want to see ourselves as we truly are. Does that make sense? It's a very powerful thing if you can do it though, because you'll see how you really are and then you'll know what to do. Yeah.
Actually, I had an out-of-body experience where I went to the mirror to
If you
look
hold
at
the mic
myself.
up a bit closer.
Oh, I had an out-of-body experience where I went to the mirror to look at myself, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just be brave and do it. Because you have to be brave when you pass and do it then anyway. So you might as well get used to it now. Why not get used to it now? Yeah.